Hi sexy, come and watch till the end. The interstellar starship Avalon is approaching a habitable planet. Homestead 2. The ship runs alone with vacant cabins. 258 team members and 5,000 visitors are asleep. Asteroids abruptly impair the ship's defenses. The primary shield is powered, but the spacecraft is heading towards a massive alien ship. Asteroid. The rock suddenly hits the ship, creating several issues. The spacecraft repairs itself, but a slumber pod wakes up. Guest Jim Preston, a mechanical specialist, woke up. A machine alerts him when his pod opens. Spent 120 years in suspended animation, and the spacecraft is 4 months near Homestead 2. He is urged to enjoy the ship's luxuries. Jim learns about his ID van, residence, and priorities. Before landing, he gets dressed, exits his cabin, and meets the shipmates, and enters a group-made automated class. The hologram's Earth updates worry Jim. Too numerous, costly, and significant. Jim constantly questioning why he should wait to ask inquiries. He is alone. Since the picture cannot communicate, he searches for others. Reaching the ship's main hall, a self-service information desk is available. The computer connects Jim to a servant when he wishes to converse. He begs to speak to the captain when he arrives alone. He cannot enter the bridge, but can watch what is happening. That the leaders are also asleep. At the telescope, Jim discovers that the spacecraft is 90 years from Homestead. He hurries to the lobby to send a message after waking up too early. He returned to Earth to inquire how to fall asleep. The transmitting equipment says the pricey call to Earth will last around 55 years to reply. Jim suffers. He finds someone at the ship's bar. Talking to the bartender, he appears odd. Jim discovers he is a robot when getting him a drink. It is Arthur. Jim cannot even tell the robot what he wants to know about him. How he arrived early. The following morning, Jim wakes up in his cell and walks to the cantina, where he discovers that most of the food is for gold class. He drinks normal coffee and then attempts to restore his bedroom. He lies down in the pod after getting it to work with all the tools. It doesn't. He then uses his equipment to enter the crew's sleeping quarters. Even that fails. Ship-wide issues occur. Jim frequents the tavern to drink, but largely to chat to Arthur. The robot convinces him to break into a gold class room. Enjoy the ship. Jim plays and watches everything. However, being alone becomes worse with time. He wanders the sleep pods inebriated one day. A spacewalking hatch. Jim suits up and opens the airlock with a handle and button. Exit door. After leaving the ship, the vista is breathtaking. Only he is awake and alert. Jim floats in space depressed after releasing his boots magnets. He removes the outfit and returns to the exit. He presses the button to kill himself, but he rushes away at the last second. Returning home, he falls over a bottle. Jim wakes up and is drawn to Aurora in a pod. He listens to her passenger interview and searches for her files. Loved her. He sat next to her pod listening to her speak afterwards. After returning to the pub, he reads her work and discusses it with Arthur. He keeps thinking about how bizarre it is that he has traveled to another planet to obtain a better life, waking up early and failing, and meeting the lady of his dreams and losing her. Be inaccessible. Jim keeps thinking about her and decides to wake her awake. He discusses it with the robot but does not understand. He will kill her if he wakes her up. Jim first refuses, but he keeps thinking about it. Until his thinking changes. He turns it on at her pod. He conceals and returns to his room when she wakes up and repeats his routine. He later searches the main area for her. She is as puzzled as he was last year. Jim takes her to the lookout and says they are the only ones awake. He informs her he cannot access the crew or ship's primary controls. Aurora panics and wants her pod back. Jim informs them the spacecraft has no special tools. Assists them fall asleep, telling her they are stranded. He encourages her to relax as they just came back to the main area from hibernation. She feels awful for him being alone aboard the ship for almost a year. Jim regrets his actions and returns to the pub. He begs Arthur not to tell Aurora he awakened her. Aurora awakens. She returns to the foyer and asks the electronic information desk about sleep pods. Jim meets her there and they eat. The information desk malfunctions as they depart. Aurora observes Jim having the same breakfast for almost 10 years at the cantina and brings him a gold-class meal. Aurora is not ready, but Jim is. Give up. She searches the hospital, reads research papers, and breaks into the crew's sleeping quarters. Jim detects additional ship issues. Aurora describes Avalon's hardships after some time. She writes, runs about the ship, and swims in the pool, becoming increasingly conscious of her feelings. She talks to Jim in the cantina because she believes his life is interesting. Why did he come to camp? Jim begins with corporate themes and says he aspires to be someone and establish a life on the new globe. Aurora reveals her purpose at the telescope afterwards. She has a round-trip ticket. She planned to spend a year at Homestead 2 before returning to Earth. The first reporter, writing the finest story ever. Jim tries to cheer Aurora up as she gives up on solving their problem. He brings her to dancing, movies, and basketball. He finishes by taking her to the bar to meet Arthur. She feels better but recalls where they are. Jim is alone with the robot and regrets what he'd done to her. Aurora entered the observatory to discover the little Chrysler building he constructed for her after he fiddled with something. A bar date follows. Dinner and life discussion. Her father died while she was little. After supper, Jim helps Aurora put on their spacesuits at the hatch. They spacewalk. Jim may now discuss about that great occurrence. Jim shuts off their boot magnets, and they float in space. Then they kiss. They sleep in his cabin. They then live together. Aurora writes about her ship life in his bedroom. Run, eat, sleep. Jim explores the ship and discovers the plant-growing bay. He gives her flowers. They visit the telescope while the ship passes a red giant. They celebrated Aurora's birthday aboard the ship and then headed to the bar. While Aurora rests, Jim sets up the ring he crafted for her in the bathroom. Arthur chatting. Aurora is told by the robot that Jim purposefully awakened her up. She is shocked to see Jim again. She flees, furious. Jim arrives home to find her items gone. Next day, he meets her at the cantina, but she flees as he talks. Aurora is desperate. She punches and kicks Jim at his residence one night to murder him. Jim apologizes over the radio for what he'd done to her. Aurora rejects his love confession. Killing her will never be forgiven. Jim had another mishap at his residence one night. The ship's primary control shuts off. Later, the elevator malfunctions. Aurora enters the main hall and sees Jim's tree. She then visits the cantina, where the food machine is broken. The deck chief asks who bombed the comms. Thus they hurry into the hallway with Mancuso in front of Jim's tree. They identify and explain to the head. How 3 pods failed is beyond him. Mancuso leads them to the bridge and discovers the ship experiencing problems. But individuals must manually examine computer specifics. When they depart the bridge, a robot nearly falls on their heads, and they notify Mancuso that ship-wide difficulties are increasing. He advises against it and teaches them how to collect the information. Mancuso examines the pods with Jim. He knows Aurora's pod's fate. Jim's actions disgust the ship's captain. He verifies his data on the bridge with Aurora later. She informs him about her pod, but he cannot help. The topic. Jim brings the 17th damaged robot. Hibernation sickness causes Mancuso to sleep and cough in the morning. Drew blood. Aurora swims to sleep that night. The ship loses gravity, and the water rises, drowning her. She moves with the pool. She survives after turning on the gravity drive. They meet while searching for Mancuso. At the bridge, the 3 are slowly discovering what happened. At sea, Mancuso discovers that 2 years ago, a big machine failed. Because the ship is attempting to move, they must discover and remedy the problem. To complete. Fix that, or the ship will be stranded. Jim and Aurora must take Mancuso to the hospital when he faints as they investigate. He is dying and cannot be saved. Later, Mancuso offers Jim his telescope. After giving them his ID bracelet, he dies. The ship shakes as the lights become a frightening crimson. Jim asks Aurora for aid and they hurry to engineering. Gravity drive failed. Another one that hurts Arthur immediately. Jim switches off. Engineering seeks the issue. Aurora gets swept in as they open the power plant hatch. The rock shattered the hull. Jim is pulled in but clings onto the hatch as it closes. He too is pulled in, but they swiftly shut the opening. After fixing it, Jim notices many hull holes. The rock impacted the reactor. Control machine. Jim believes he can locate replacement components. After replacing the component, the reactor still would not open. Him doing it does not work. To cool the reactor, Jim goes outside to open the vent door. He gives Aurora Mancuso since he may not return as they depart. She helps him dress and encourages him to return, because she needs him aboard the ship. Aurora returns to the reactor's hazardous heat. Jim approaches the vent as a nuclear bolt strikes her arm. The reactor room heats up as he tries to open the vent door. Unlock it. He learns he must manually open the reactor door to vent. He tells Aurora. He orders her to open the reactor against her disapproval. He tells her they must rescue the others, and she lets the reactor's steam escape. The reactor's gases shattered Jim's connection. His suit pressure is decreasing. Aurora swiftly finds another outfit when he tells her what occurred. Bring him in. She receives another apology. She suits up and flies to fetch him, but her rope is too short. She is dragged back but grabs his leash and pulls him in at the last minute. Aurora pulls Jim to the hospital but finds him dead. She bypasses medication and revives him with Mancuso's band. The medical pod revives Jim by itself. Aurora frees him. Aurora repairs Arthur and appropriately buries Mancuso in space. Jim brings her to the hospital and tells her he can use the medical pod to sleep. He orders her to remain in the pod the rest of the way. Later, she refuses and stays awake on the ship with him. Jim proposes to her aboard the ship, and they live there forever. Avalon returns to Homestead 2 after 88 years. The crew awakens to a strange spacecraft. Aurora sends him a letter recounting her and Jim's ship life while everyone was sleeping. The end. See you later, sexy.